What in the world was I thinking? I've never done anything like this before. Well, actually, I've tried on a couple of occasions and failed aggressively. These were the thoughts that were going through my mind somewhere around 9 or 10,000 feet of altitude north of Santa Fe, New Mexico in the high mountain desert on a long trail run attempt. Now, truth be told, that's not a picture of me, it's a stock photo, but there wasn't anybody around even at the time, and if there was, I'd be thinking more about not getting lost and having enough water to make it all the way through rather than enjoying the natural beauty that was all around me. You see, somewhere around the year 490 BC, a Greek messenger ran 26 miles nonstop back to the city of Athens to report the joyous news that the Greeks had been victorious over the Persians at the Battle of Marathon. And for the next 2,300 years, that distance, 26 miles, give or take, 42 kilometers, was considered the distance, the limit of human endurance from a running perspective. But somewhere around the 1900s, a fringe group of runners started testing longer and longer distances. What does it really take to run 50 kilometers? No, 50 miles, 100 miles, or more in very challenging environments, like maybe Death Valley in the middle of August, or perhaps Antarctica. These are the types of people that have thought about ways to make something that once seemed impossible and make it possible. Now, I tell you this story as my pursuit of long-distance running has certainly been a passion of mine, and this isn't some pathetic boast of athletic prowess. In my particular case, it's probably more just plain old stubborn than it is any sort of athletic gift. But the key insight that came to me throughout those long miles on trails was something that, when I tell you what it is, you're probably going to laugh. It is, you don't need to have done it to be able to do it. Laughably simple, but stick with me for a moment. Let me tell you what I mean. The way you deal with that adversity, the way you deal with mile after mile is really comes down to two pretty simple things. One is mindset, pressing through obstacles, and the second really is all about the preparation that you do. In a running environment, it really is about nutrition and hydration and the training regimen that you would go through. But I think this mindset and preparation mantra has an awful lot to do with any difficult pursuit, and certainly has an awful lot to do with the types of challenges that our industry is up against today. And that's where I'd like to make the turn. It really is about infrastructure challenges that are out there, aging infrastructure. Jim referenced the idea of changes on the generation side of things with more wind and solar and renewables. And that's a terrific thing from a sustainability point of view, but it also comes with certain challenges with intermittency. Sometimes the wind doesn't blow when the sun doesn't shine, or maybe you've got energy when you didn't really need it. It creates new challenges that you've got to find a way to overcome. Environmental pressures are happening at higher and higher rates. That idea of how do you provide reliable services when you're up against more fires and floods and ice storms in Texas, and dare I even say it, given what we could experience in the coming days, hurricanes. This is the environment that we need to operate in. And the third major category of challenge really has to do with changing consumer expectations. The world is certainly more dependent on electricity than ever before, and no life survives without water. So these are precious, precious commodities that are not really optional in a modern society. So we've got to think about that same idea of mindset and preparation. Let's turn things that might feel impossible some days, and let's make them possible. During my brief minutes with you today, I want to talk about three building blocks that have to do with the preparation and the mindset to take us from where we are to the future that I know we can achieve. That first building block starts with visibility. And really thinking about the changing nature of the grid, I'll start with renewables from a generation side. That creates certainly some advantages, but it comes with some impacts when it comes to variability. And that variability really comes in the form of big generation side of things, large-scale wind farms and solar, but it also is happening at the edge of the grid with smaller distributed energy resources, rooftop solar, batteries behind meters, microgrids. All of that creates a lot of complexity in the grid itself. Environmental pressures, I talked about this already, but storms as well as things like water scarcity means that you're up against a different set of challenges that apply pressure at inopportune moments. And you also have larger changes in the profile of demand fluctuations, and that could be for a lot of different reasons. Usage profiles, what happens to the traditional duck curve during the day when everyone starts working from home, but also the changes in transportation with more and more EVs coming onto the grid will change that demand profile. EV growth from 2019 to 2020 was over 40%. 20 to 21, it accelerated to over 200%, and that trend is going to continue. Think about the EV from the perspective of the grid. It's kind of the equivalent of a small house that sort of randomly roams around town and occasionally plugs in and turns on. That is not a very predictable load, and that problem gets worse when you're dealing with fleets, which will be electrified in the years ahead. It's too expensive to just change things and say, hey, look, we're going to have enough generation to be able to cover that fluctuation in demand at the end. So you've got to figure out a better way to operate this grid. You've got to figure out a better way to optimize cost, supply and demand, and the cost that goes along with it. In a lot of grid scenarios today, the top 10% of the use cases, if you really want to cover that at all costs, it means an extra 40% in terms of the cost of the infrastructure. Not sustainable with larger and larger levels of variation. So dealing with this problem, that seemingly impossible level of complexity, it starts with visibility. You've got to know what's going on. And from an Itron perspective, this is where I think we can really contribute with thousands, millions of endpoints out in the field. That creates more points of visibility that you can actually work with, and we combine that with programs and analytics, much like our optimizer program, which is really meant to deal with a much changing grid environment with things like EV detection. If you know where they are and you know what it starts to look like, you can start to plan capacity one way or the other. You can start to plan what the profile is really going to look like, but it starts with improving that visibility. First step in preparation, understanding what's out there and getting ready to deal with it. Second step, second building block that I want to talk about is once you've got that visibility, you've got this mountain of information. Today, the amount of data that is created on our planet is nearly overwhelming. 1.7 megabytes per person per second every day with the population that we have. So by the time I finish this speech, there's going to be another terabyte or two of data that's been created in the world today. From an AMI system alone, think about reading 4, 5, 6 million endpoints every 15 minutes, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. You've got your hands on a treasure trove of information. Now, how do you pull actionable intelligence out of that so you know what to do with that mountain of data? Visibility. Now you've got data, let's turn it into something actionable. Let's make it usable information. Here I would give you an example of city utilities in Springfield, Missouri. Community-owned utility, 320 square miles roughly of territory, and this really is a do-it-all utility. So it's electricity, it's gas, it's water, it's broadband for the community, it's public transportation, all housed under one umbrella. And in this particular case, I think the way they have created actionable intelligence by using an Itron AMI system and the suite of products that goes around it has fundamentally changed how they interact with the data and the information that they have created. And it really comes down to things like being able to detect meter tampering within a couple of days, being able to reduce water leakage by more than 90%, being able to understand what's going on inside of the grid and be able to take action on it by using that treasure trove of information and pulling actionable intelligence out of it. When we start to add artificial intelligence and machine learning to the information that we have. We're taking visibility and we're creating something actionable out of it. And we've already seen that start to happen today. Third building block that I would want to give you is really about, now that you've got actionable information, let's do something active with it. Let's manage things in a much more dynamic way. This is the third building block to talk about. You've got a grid, which is far more complicated. You've got external variables acting on it, which also creates more volatility. You've been able to get some visibility into what's going on. Now let's use that to control the grid and all of those elements in a much more cohesive manner. And here, I think there's no better example than distributed intelligence. This notion of being able to compute at the edge of the network is really a fantastic building block to really create a much more dynamic grid. So, distributed intelligence, what is it? You've seen this before. It is the equivalent of a smartphone come to our sector. So it is an endpoint on the edge of the grid. It has downloadable capability to be able to look for certain signals and be able to take certain actions. You've got an infrastructure that goes along with that to be able to securely provision, manage, update all of those applications from a centralized application enterprise storage. And then you can put it to work to be able to pull certain things out of the grid and take action. This is not mission impossible. This is not something that hasn't already started. Today we have more than 4.2 million endpoints in the ground that have this capability, and it's growing every day. There are many, many, many millions of more in backlog that will be rolled out in the years ahead. That enterprise application management system is in place, and our customers are using it today. No better example and a leader in this area is Tampa Electric. TECO has more than 800,000 endpoints in the field running a few million applications, and they've already started to put those applications to work on grid efficiency as well as safety applications. And it was really, really exciting to watch the journey, which was not always smooth and not always perfect, but take for something from true concept and fundamentally put a different capability in the ground and be able to put it to work to create a much more dynamic environment. And this is just the start. The innovation that we've seen has truly, truly been magical, taking an idea and putting it into practice in the field in something like 3-4 months. Really, really fascinating pace of innovation. And there's plenty more where that came from. Brian Benz from Electra will talk about his vision later on, and we look forward to the opportunity to serving them in their journey down this path as well. David Lusick from TECO will be giving a talk at one of the sessions later on this week, and I would encourage you to tune in, listen to their journey, and listen to his words about how to do this and how to take advantage of that pace of learning and the innovation that comes along with it. All right, so we've got our 3 building blocks. What's next? Let's put this together. Let's start to create that common shared vision and advance things and take what was once considered impossible and make it possible. Unleashing that shared vision is really about this conference and the power of the energy and the community that's together inside of this room. We are dependent on you. We hope we can provide great technology and services and our energy and passion to be able to do that. But let's find new ways of using this basic capability. It's much more agile than we've seen before. This is a different way to procure the technology. It isn't a fixed capability that you buy at a fixed point in time and then use for the next 10 or 20 years. This is something that will grow and learn as you need it. You'll be able to deal with much more dynamic environments in the years ahead. We've seen changes in the business model, not only on the regulatory side, but also in the usage. Once you've built that network, that capability, maybe you started with electrical AMI kind of use case, but then you could also add water or gas if you happen to have a combination environment. You could share that network between utilities that have a common service territory. So there's endless number of ways we can use this capability, and it really comes down to having a shared vision and finding the right solution to meet the needs of your community. That community is fundamentally important. And inside of this room, I think there's two separate but related spheres of community that I think are very important to call out. The first one is the ecosystem that it takes to put this together. And it starts with our sponsors and partners, that ecosystem, and all of the great technology you see in the Knowledge Center. Being able to work together to create that future is really a fascinating community and something that adds richness to this event and certainly to the technology that we can provide. And the second really is the communities that all of you serve. That when your services are out in play in your community, you're helping out the people that are under that territory and providing essential services. And also much broader than a normal utility setting, but in a smart city setting. We're extremely proud to work in the smart city space. There's a project underway now in the city of Paris with CLS to automate more than 200,000 streetlights and cover more than 300 monuments around the great city of Paris. Let's automate that, and once that automation of streetlights, that canopy network is built, you can add things like smart parking and crowd information, and as well as even ideas around smart irrigation. A smart flower pot, never thought of it, but once you start to put these canopy networks in place, it's almost endless where the mind can go to create and have good usage for the technology itself. We've done similar projects in Copenhagen and Glasgow and in Chicago and Miami, and each time you do it, you see massive savings from an operational standpoint, but a new vibrancy in the community itself. That belief in the ecosystem is what keeps us very, very interested in serving those communities. I need to take just 1 minute and thank everyone for being at the event. It's certainly not ideal from a timing perspective. I know you had to make some decisions before you got on the plane, given potential storms that could be heading our way, but thank you for being here. Sponsors, thank you for sponsoring the event, and all of the advisory committee. I don't know if you knew why you wore the red shirts today, but in college football, when you're a red shirt, that usually means you get to stay on for an extra year, and it didn't even count against your eligibility. There's no subtle threat there, but thank you for the advisory board for everything that you do, as well as the Outcomes Advisory Board, helping us learn and create together. This speaks volume about what you do every day in support of your community and in support of us, and we're deeply, deeply grateful for it. What we promise, Marina covered this well. We are here certainly to do a couple of things. We believe deeply in doing a better job with natural resources, creating more intelligent and more possible technology to be able to really embody the idea of resourcefulness and doing more with the opportunities that we have, and we measure ourselves through the success of our customers. When we take on a project, we want to make sure you are successful in achieving your business objectives. So what's left? That is the preparatory blocks for our 100-mile journey, and I think that let's use those building blocks, and there's really only one thing left to do, and that's get to it. So let's go explore those possibilities. Thank you so much for your time.